Human history is filled with bizarre customs, strange rituals, and practices that make you wonder, what were they thinking? Today, we're diving into one of the most eyebrow-raising topics of all, weird sex practices throughout history. Buckle up, because things are about to get strange and a little steamy. From ancient Egypt to Victorian England, people have done some pretty weird things in the name of love, lust, and everything in between. So, let's take a journey through time and explore some of the most peculiar, hilarious, and downright bizarre sexual practices our ancestors thought were a good idea. Let's start in ancient Egypt, where the Nile wasn't just a river. It was the setting for some seriously weird sexual practices. The Egyptians believed that the god Atum created the universe by, well, getting a little too friendly with himself. To honor this creative act, some men would perform a ritual that involved, shall we say, imitating the god's actions, in public, on the banks of the Nile. But that's not all. Fish, especially the catfish, were believed to have strong sexual energy. So, naturally, some Egyptians thought it was a good idea to attach a live catfish to their nether regions as a way to enhance fertility and sexual power. Let's just say that's one fishing trip you wouldn't want to join. Next, we move to ancient Greece, the birthplace of democracy, philosophy, and some very strange sex practices. The Greeks weren't all about the beauty of the human body, but they also had a thing for animals, specifically pigeons. Yes, pigeons. Wealthy Greek women would sometimes keep pigeons in their homes, not just as pets, but as a way to enhance their sexual pleasure. The pigeons were trained to peck at certain areas of the body. And let's just say these birds weren't just interested in breadcrumbs. Talk about getting your feathers ruffled. But the weirdness doesn't stop there. The Greeks also believed that sneezing was a sign of sexual arousal. That's right. A sneeze wasn't just a reaction to dust. It was a signal that things were getting hot and heavy. So the next time someone sneezes around you, just remember that in ancient Greece, that was basically the equivalent of a wink and a nudge. Now let's travel to medieval Europe, where love and lust were a little more complicated. Back in the day, knights would go off to fight in the Crusades, leaving their wives behind for months or even years. To make sure their wives stayed faithful, some men supposedly locked them into chastity belts, metal contraptions. That made it impossible for any funny business to happen. Of course, the reality of chastity belts is a bit murky. They were more likely a myth or used as a joke rather than a widespread practice. But the idea of a metal bikini designed to keep women chaste, that's some next-level paranoia. And then there were the love potions. Medieval Europeans were all about potions and elixirs to help them win over their crushes or reignite passion in their marriages. These concoctions could be made from anything, from herbs and spices to animal parts. One particularly popular ingredient? Spanish fly, a type of beetle that was ground into a powder and added to drinks. It was supposed to act as an aphrodisiac, but in reality, it was more likely to give you a nasty case of poisoning than a passionate night. Victorian England, a time of strict social rules, stiff upper lips, and some very peculiar ideas about sex. The Victorians were so prudish that they couldn't even say the word leg without blushing. In fact, they were so uptight about anything remotely sexual that they started covering up the legs of their furniture. Yes, you heard that right, furniture, because they thought exposed table legs were too sexual. Imagine getting turned on by a table leg. That's taking the phrase getting a rise to a whole new level. But the Victorians didn't just stop at covering furniture. They also believed that too much sexual activity could drain a person's energy, leading to all sorts of health problems. This led to some bizarre treatments for sexual exhaustion, including cold baths, electric shock therapy, and even devices designed to prevent nocturnal emissions. These devices were basically metal contraptions that attached to a man's, little gentleman, and would wake him up with a sharp poke if he started getting aroused in his sleep. Talk about a rude awakening. Now, let's head over to Japan, where things get really weird in Japanese folklore. There's a creature called the tanuki, a raccoon dog with, shall we say, extraordinarily large testicles. The tanuki was believed to use its massive scrotum to shapeshift, fly, and even catch fish. While this might sound like something out of a cartoon, the tanuki's testicles became a symbol of good fortune, and people would even make statues of tanuki with their oversized full display. Nothing says good luck like a pair of giant magical testicles. But that's not all. The Japanese also had a tradition of pillow books, which were essentially erotic handbooks filled with illustrations and advice on lovemaking. These books were incredibly detailed, covering everything from different positions to tips on how to keep your partner satisfied. And while the illustrations might make you blush, they also show that the Japanese had a very open and practical attitude towards sex. After all, who wouldn't want a little bedtime reading to spice things up? Lastly, we head to Africa, where the Himba people of Namibia have a unique way of dealing with extramarital affairs. If a man suspects his wife of cheating, he might ask her to undergo a purity test. This test involves having the woman drink a special herbal potion that's supposed to make her vomit if she's been unfaithful. If she keeps the potion down, she is declared innocent. If she throws up, she's guilty. It's basically the medieval trial by ordeal, but with more vomiting and less fire. But here's the kicker. The potion doesn't actually have any magical properties. It's just a disgusting mix of herbs that would make anyone sick. So the whole thing is more of a psychological test than anything else. If the woman believes in the potion's power, she might throw up out of guilt or fear. But if she's confident in her innocence, she'll probably keep it down. It's a bizarre practice, but it just goes to show how far people will go to maintain the appearance of fidelity. And now, it's time for you to subscribe.